This is the Headbangers Almanac. Welcome to the Headbangers Almanac. My name is Will. I've fallen ass backwards into a podcast, a heavy metal podcast, but I'm quickly realizing that I probably don't know as much as I should to really create or host a heavy metal podcast. This has a lot to do with what was available when I was growing up, either by what my brother had or lack of finances to buy a bunch of albums, lack of knowledge. We don't have the internet back in the 80s, so I didn't, you wouldn't know what was coming out unless you bought like magazines or your friend said, "Oh, dude, you got to check this out." So just very limited accessibility when I was growing up, and it shut me off a lot from the heavy metal world. And I kind of want to go back and re-experience that. Now we have accessibility at an all-time high. We have this crazy thing called the internet where I can literally find every album that I missed out on, find what was released when, specifically through the Metal Archives, this giant database of artists and albums that were released. Although there comes a couple of caveats with that, because it's ran by a certain group of people. They might not see a band being influential in the metal world, or they might see other bands that you would think are, and they don't feature them at all. So like me, Led Zeppelin and AC/DC really got me into heavy metal, but they're not cited on the Metal Archives. Or bands like Rush, who are progressive rock, but a lot of metal fans, they share an appreciation with Rush that they're included on the Metal Archives. So stuff like that, we might have to, kind of dance around, but it's going to be my primary resource to kind of decide what to listen to. My other question was where to start. And I thought about starting in 1982 when I was born, but I miss a lot of stuff in the 70s, obviously. It really got pointed out when we were talking, or when I was listening to Black Sabbath and Dio takes over for Ozzy Osbourne, and you really don't know who Dio is until you listen to his stuff in the 70s, and you actually miss out on all of Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne if you start in the 80s. So I didn't want to do that, because to me, early Black Sabbath is some of the best Black Sabbath, and I know there's a huge point of contention of who the better singer is, but I don't want to cut Ozzy completely out, because that is a band that he's most well known for. So if not, that's why he is known, besides his solo stuff. So didn't want to skip out on that stuff. 82 is a little bit late to start. Thought about going back to 1968. The problem with that is all you have is Deep Purple, a band called Olympic, which I've never heard of, and there's a little bit of Led Zeppelin, depending on how you feel, if they've influenced heavy metal enough to be in that list. Deep Purple was largely psychedelic rock prior to 1970, so we're not really missing a lot by not going back to 1968 with Deep Purple. We'd still get their major initial album that was real heavy metal influenced if we start out in 1970. Again, depending on how you view Led Zeppelin, we could hit those guys in 1969, or we could just skip them and we still get the fourth album and stuff like that. We can kind of go back and say, oh yeah, don't forget that their first two albums came out in 1969, and they were fucking amazing, by the way. It's great albums that you should definitely listen to. So I think 1968 is a little bit too early, because we're really only skipping over like five to seven albums that don't really do much for the genre, which sounds terrible. And I hate to say that, but I guess that's one of the many things you guys will flame me down in the comments for. So then 1970 seems like the obvious choice, because the album that we're going to talk about today is the first released album in 1970, and it's probably what many consider the birthplace of heavy metal, which is Black Sabbath's self-titled album. It came out on February 13th of 1970. It has 7 tracks, 38 minutes, 7 seconds long. There were 2 major versions that were released. There was a European version that had Evil Woman, which is a Crow cover, not the movie. It was a band Crow, but this is a cover of their song. It actually was the A side of its own single. So there was an Evil Woman single that came out, and then it was also the B side to the Wizard single. So it's a song that's been circulated quite a bit, especially over there. So there's a good reason why it's on the European version of the album, the original version of the album, right? And then you have the North American side, which is actually what we get on Spotify. And that has Wicked World, which was the B side to Evil Woman. And that's, I just said it, I'll say it again. It is the version on Spotify. That's the one I actually listened to, although I did go back and listen to Evil Woman. So a couple of notable songs. We have obviously the Black Sabbath, the opening track, right? Which opens with a rainstorm and has iconic horror themed riffs and basically represents the birth of metal right then and there. It talks about this black figure appearing out of nowhere, scaring the shit out of Ozzy Osbourne, which was actually it was a dream of one of the other bandmates. What's his name? Anyways, it was a dream or a vision that another dude had in the band. So but they converted it over to a song. But it's a massive song that definitely needs to be listened to, because when you find out that song came out in 1970, not much sounded like it. Almost nothing sounded like it. It's just so crazy how different it was. We have the Wizard, which is harmonica at the beginning. It's very jammy. I always imagine Gandalf in the opening scene of like Lord of the Rings whenever it comes on, just this wizard that everybody loves, and he's just like spreading his Mario trick, that whole thing. So Wizard is a great song, deserving of its own single, obviously, so just really good. And then you have Nativity in Black, which is another catchy song. Those are the two songs that I would probably recommend to newcomers to Black Sabbath, especially the first album. If you haven't listened to Black Sabbath before, The Wizard, Nativity in Black, NIB, those would be the first two songs that I listened to. If you want to see like this dark side of a doom metal, the birth of doom metal, I would definitely go with Black Sabbath, the song, the self-titled song. And then Wicked World. I actually like Wicked World and probably like it better than Evil Woman. I'm actually glad that we got the North American version on Spotify, because I definitely prefer Wicked World over Evil Woman. I get it. It is an original song, which is good, so that's always a bonus that it's not like a cover of somebody else, although Hush from Deep Purple was a cover, and it's one of their most popular songs from 1968. So it's not, covers aren't bad, they just, it's cool that we have an original song on the North American version, and it's really good. 3 of those songs are on the compilation We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll, which is probably one of the best compilations put out from Black Sabbath. And the fact that the 3 songs that I mentioned are on there, that's not the reason why I pick them. They're just that flipping good. They're so pivotal in this time and age that those are songs that people need to be aware of, at least. So I think if I do a album review, I'm socially obligated to come up with a rating, and I suck at ratings. I hate ratings, but the best way that I can think of to come up with one is if I took the number of songs that I like divided by the total number of songs, and then did some funky math in the background, like divided a number by 2 and then divided by 10. Now I get a number of stars. And I think that with this being 7 tracks, I love 6 tracks on this album. 6 divided by 7 is like 82%. Divide that by 2, so we're at 42%. Divided by 10, so we're 4.2 stars. I round down because I play D&D, and you should always fuck over the other person by rounding down. I think this is a 4-star album. The only glaring issue that I have with it is what the fuck is that song? It's Sleeping Village, I think it is. Sleeping Village is probably the weakest song on the album, and it's got like this twangy western type vibe to it. It's the only one I didn't like, and so if I took that out of the mix, I'm going 4 stars. So 4 stars. If you liked what you heard or saw, or I don't know, if you think this has some merit, then come back, subscribe, like, I have a podcast. I don't know why I have a podcast, but I have a podcast with the same name. It's on Spotify and everywhere that you can find a fucking podcast. But there it is, Headbanger's Almanac, and we'll see where this goes. But I'm having fun listening to this stuff for the first time, second time, whatever. So have fun.